All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a case that starts out as a local mystery and just rapidly spirals into the sprawling, high-stakes international thriller. We're looking at the incredibly tragic 1996 kidnapping of 17-year-old Jaime Estrada. And the reason this case is so critical to understand is how it reveals that terrifying intersection between everyday life and these hidden criminal underworlds. It's honestly a masterclass in how federal investigators have to instantly adapt when the stakes become literally life and death. It all starts with the most mundane setup imaginable. It's June 27, 1996, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Jaime Estrada, who's this popular high school senior and a local baseball star, pulls up to a convenience store in his custom Monte Carlo. He steps out to buy a couple of sodas, leaves his cousin in the car, and on his way out, he spots a girl he actually recognizes. Her name's Juanita Gonzalez. He stops to chat with her, and just like that, a blue and white van pulls up, and Jaime vanishes without a trace. So how does a quick run for sodas turn into a massive cartel conspiracy? Well, that's exactly the thread we're going to pull today. Now, in kidnapping cases, those first 24 hours dictate absolutely everything. It's what investigators call the ticking clock. Just 3 hours after Jaime is snatched, his brother Mark gets a terrifying page with a 911 code. When he calls back, the demands are immediate, $70,000. By hour 9, out of sheer desperation, the family alerts the police, which brings FBI Special Agent Dan Kraft onto the scene. And then, by hour 27, this incredibly risky ransom drop goes completely sideways. When you're studying hostage situations, managing this immediate window is absolutely crucial. The pressure on the FBI right out of the gate here was just immense. And that ticking clock? It was fueled by absolute terror. The kidnappers didn't mince words with Jaime's brother. They explicitly threatened to cut off his ears, skin him, and literally mailed body parts back to the family. They even threatened to wipe out the entire Estrada family if they went to the cops. I want you to really absorb the gravity of this. This wasn't some standard negotiation. It was pure, brutal intimidation. The family was paralyzed by fear all night long before finally breaking down and going to the authorities at dawn.
So, when facing that kind of overwhelming chaos, modern law enforcement has to rely on structured intelligence. The FBI immediately deployed something called Rapid Start. It's a sophisticated computer database designed specifically to catch those tiny, needle-in-a-haystack links in massive data streams during major cases. Every partial phone number, every tiny clue goes right in there. They tapped the Estrada phones, which became absolutely critical when the kidnappers called back. This time, the ransom dropped to $30,000, and they demanded the Monte Carlo. But the most horrifying intel gathered from those taps, Jaime himself got on the line and confirmed he'd been shot. So now the FBI isn't just dealing with a kidnapping, they are managing a critical, ticking clock medical emergency.
With Jaime bleeding out somewhere, the FBI simply couldn't afford a slow, cautious negotiation. They had to act. FBI agents Kevin Cassidy and Ron Hosco over in Chicago orchestrated this meticulous sting operation. They sent Jaime's brother Paulo to make the drop, but they moved the location to a wide-open department store parking lot to protect bystanders. They told him to leave the cash inside the Monte Carlo. But here is the true tactical genius of this plan. The final step was locking the car doors. The kidnappers were entirely expecting unlocked doors. By forcing them to deal with locked doors, the FBI engineered a moment of confusion. It broke their rhythm and bought the tactical teams the split second they needed to box them in.
But, plans rarely survive contact with the enemy. The takedown signal was given, but the suspects reacted instantly. They pointed a gun at an agent, chucked a loaded 9mm handgun out the window, and just hit the gas. This triggered a frantic 120-mile-per-hour highway chase tearing straight toward downtown Chicago. These guys were weaving across 4 lanes of civilian traffic, deliberately trying to cause a massive pileup just to escape. Ultimately, agents had to execute a really precise pit maneuver, basically bumping the rear quarter panel of the suspect's car to send it into a controlled spin and physically box them in.
Okay, so the dust settles on the highway and the FBI arrests 3 men, Salemi Varela, Jesus Rees, and Miguel Torres. But they pop the trunk, and it's empty. Jaime is not there. The suspects completely refuse to say a word. But back in the interrogation room, their pagers are just ringing continuously. Their associates are desperately trying to reach them. The FBI traces the number, but it's unpublished. And here's where it gets incredibly frustrating. The phone company refuses to release the address without a subpoena, which is nearly impossible to get on a Friday night at 11 p.m. It's a chilling reminder of how administrative red tape can clash with life-or-death realities. The agents hit a total brick wall while a 17-year-old boy is dying somewhere in the city.
But then,
Literally the very next day, a massive plot twist peels back a completely new layer of this investigation. Over in North Chicago, a neighbor witnesses what looks like a double abduction. Two men, Pedro Montoya and Chabo Rodriguez, break free from their captors and run to the police. Their story? They were snatched off the street a week prior, shoved into, you guessed it, a blue and white van, completely identical to the one used in Jaime's abduction.
So when FBI agent Cassidy shows these escaped captives a photo array of the three men arrested the night before, they immediately point them out as their kidnappers. But there's a really weird discrepancy here. Montoya and Rodriguez say they were tied to metal poles in a basement alongside a third man. But Jaime, in a brief moment of consciousness, had actually recalled to a sheriff's investigator that he was being held in a bathroom with a white tile floor. The FBI realizes with a sinking feeling that they aren't just dealing with a single crew, they're dealing with a whole network of multiple stash houses. Jaime wasn't the third man in the basement, he was being held somewhere else by the exact same organization.
So what's the connection? Why were all these men being targeted? The FBI raids that basement house and uncovers the cartel's terrifying accounting book, which was essentially a massive debt collection ring. Pedro Montoya owed the cartel $130,000. That third man who had escaped earlier, that was Ricardo Francisco, a drug runner who owed $100,000. Chabo Rodriguez wasn't even in the game himself, but his son owed drug money, so they grabbed the father to force a payment. This crew was a systemic, highly organized kidnapping ring operating on behalf of a ruthless drug cartel just to balance their books.
Which brings us to this really important number, 0. That is exactly how much money Jaime Estrada owed the cartel. 0. He had absolutely no involvement in the drug trade. He wasn't a runner, he wasn't a dealer, he was just a totally normal high school kid who liked baseball and went out to buy some sodas.
So how on earth did he end up in that van? The FBI eventually discovered the heartbreaking truth. Remember the girl he stopped to talk to outside the store? Juanita Gonzalez? Well, she had actually stolen a kilo of cocaine from the cartel. Knowing they were going to kill her for it, she laid a trap. She lured a random teenager to her location and framed him for the theft just to save her own life. Jaime was nothing more than a tragic, entirely innocent pawn in a deadly game he didn't even know was being played.
And the consequences of that betrayal were just devastating. After being shot by his captors and left completely untreated for 2 days, Jaime was just dumped on a city street. He made it to a hospital, managing to recall the name of a captor called Beto and this one specific detail of a red toilet seat, before slipping into a drug-induced coma to survive multiple surgeries, but his body just couldn't fight off the massive infection from the gunshot wound. 17-year-old Jaime Estrada passed away. And just like that, the FBI's kidnapping case officially became a murder investigation.
With Jaime gone, the FBI shifted gears from rescue to retribution. They utilized meticulous forensic science to close the net on the remaining killers. At the stash house, they found a Norinco assault rifle. Ballistics matched it perfectly to the bullet pulled from Jaime. In that same house, they found an envelope with a Los Angeles address, and inside were photos of a man posing with that exact rifle. That photo identified a fourth suspect, Jose de la Paz Sanchez. And later, when they finally located the apartment where Jaime was actually held, they found microscopic traces of blood deep in the bathroom floor grout. DNA proved it was Jaime's. The physical evidence was literally locking the suspects directly into the crime scene.
Armed with that photograph from the envelope, the FBI tracked Jose Sanchez all the way to Los Angeles. They tailed him for hours on the freeway, finally cornering him at a home improvement store. But, a photo isn't enough to make a solid arrest in public. You really need a positive ID. So an undercover agent followed him inside on foot and spotted a very specific identifying mark, a Grim Reaper tattoo on his right upper arm. They made the arrest quietly right there. And it was Sanchez's confession that finally broke the silence, admitting to the cartel's orders and placing himself right at the scene of Jaime's shooting.
Through Sanchez's confession and dozens of interviews, the dominoes finally fell. The shooter, Bato, was identified as Luis Carino. His own sister broke down and confessed to the FBI that she heard the gunshot and was literally forced to clean Jaime's blood off that bathroom floor with bleach, which of course led investigators straight to that DNA evidence in the grout. In October 1997, the physical evidence and this whole web of testimonies were presented to a federal jury in Chicago. Justice was swift. Varela, Ruiz, Torres, and Sanchez were all convicted of racketeering, conspiracy, and kidnapping. They all received life in prison without the possibility of parole.
But the book isn't fully closed on Jaime Estrada. While 4 men will spend the rest of their lives behind bars, the FBI is still hunting.
Juanita Gonzalez, the girl who framed an innocent boy and orchestrated this whole nightmare, completely vanished into Mexico. And Luis Bato Carino, the man who actually pulled the trigger, is currently the subject of an international Interpol manhunt. The cartel machinery was broken, but two of its darkest gears are still out there. Which leaves us with a pretty haunting final question to consider. With the FBI's relentless memory and international reach, is it really only a matter of time before Juanita Gonzalez and Luis Carino are finally brought to justice? Thank you for checking out this explainer. Keep analyzing the facts, and we'll see you next time.